Hello, and welcome to episode 16 of the East Africa Travel Podcast, hosted by me, Charlotte Beauvoisin, author of Diary of a Mzungu. Thanks for tuning in. In today's episode, we resume the conversation with Ian Redmond OBE. Mandevu, the bearded one, is one of his local African names. He's also known of Shabadua, and his wife Caroline, Nyabadua. Listen to this episode to find out why. I spoke to Ian at their family home in Stroud, Gloucestershire, a small town in the UK. Ian Redmond is a self-confessed gorillaholic who's been hooked for 40 years. He's a tropical field biologist and a conservationist. In last week's episode, we talked about the interconnectedness of life and how the elephant, chimpanzee and gorilla, gardeners of the forest of the Congo Basin, are connected with a loaf of bread in England, and importantly how local people can benefit financially from the ecosystem services of animals that are often regarded as a nuisance to local people when the animals trample, tread or eat their crops or endanger human life. We also talked about Ian's role in the mountain gorilla story and his mentor, Dr. Dian Fossey. He told us about the turning points in his life, the killing of Digit, the young silverback gorilla, and Charles, the elephant. Today we talk about the DRC, the Democratic Republic of the Congo, and a recently identified rare bird. We talk about Kahuzi-Biega National Park, how safe it is or not to travel there, and I ask Ian whether there's any other thing as good a model as gorilla tourism. He tells me all about bonobos, a great ape I'd love to see one day. He talks about the phenomenon called the primatologist's neck. And which great ape is his favourite? Will he answer that question or not? Ian has very many claims to fame. He coached Sigourney Weaver how to grunt like a gorilla for the film Gorillas in the Mist that came out in 1988. She was nominated for Best Actress for that. Another little known fact I learnt recently. In 1999, TV viewers in the UK voted for the 100 greatest TV moments. And they put Sir David Attenborough's sequence with the gorillas at number 12, ranking it ahead of Queen Elizabeth II's coronation and the wedding of Charles and Diana. If you ask a British person about the gorillas, nearly everyone has seen that clip on TV many, many times, and it really kindled an interest and a deeper appreciation of gorillas, who until that point had been seen as scary monsters. We now know them as gentle vegetarians. There was an interesting discovery. A new bird, yellow-crested helmet shrike.
I didn't see that.
I saw the story about it
Splendid.
yesterday in the Congo. I think an American university that funded it. And it was only when I was halfway through reading the story that I realised it's in the Albertine Rift, a long list of Congolese researchers accredited, and I think they found 18 birds. Absolutely
listed as a lost bird by the American Bird Conservancy, so had not been seen in nearly 2 decades. Nice. Where were they? Itombwe, yes.
Which part?
Itombwe Massif, that's south of Kahuzi-Biega.
Okay.
South of Bukavu. And the most southerly gorillas in Africa, and there's very little in the way of resources going in to conserve it, so people are very worried about the rate of deforestation and exploitation of minerals and so on.
So this is gorilla habitat?
It is gorilla habitat and chimpanzee habitat, forest elephant habitat. It should be a jewel in the crown of the DRC, but it's getting some protection. There are some people working there to try and get conservation going. But
perhaps the discovery of this long lost bird will help boost conservation and tourism in the area.
Anything like that, a story like that was going to help.
Because I think Kahuzi-Biega, which is to the south west of Lake Kivu, so it's bordering Rwanda almost. It's fairly accessible, and in terms of safety, I think it's quite safe, isn't it, for tourism?
It depends.
Yes, okay, it's a blanket statement.
You almost have to check on the day that you're planning to cross if there's been any incident. But if you've got an arrangement with the park, then they will tell the border that you're coming for gorilla tracking, and they give you a sort of a day visa for a fee. So, but that depends on if there's just been an outrage, atrocity, by the bad guys with guns who are still lurking around in the forest there. They're mainly after minerals and other natural resources, so their primary means of income isn't robbing tourists or holding them to ransom. But no one wants them to get into that business either. So security is of concern, and because of all the unrest in both North and South Kivu, the State Department in the US and the Foreign Commonwealth Office in the UK advise against all travel to the region.
Right, okay.
Which means that it's not impossible, but your travel insurance wouldn't cover you.
Yeah.
Unless you take out sort of hostile territories travel insurance, like a war correspondent, and then that's probably more expensive than most people want to put into. So you can wing it for a day or two, but if something goes wrong, then you don't have travel insurance, and your whatever nationality you are, your diplomatic representative in that country might be limited in what they can do to help you, just because of the insecurity in the area.
We were talking with my tourism hat on. We get so exasperated by these travel advisories because often they are... I kind of understand the rationale of them, because the British government would be responsible for a British tourist in Uganda, but often they feel like they're scaremongering and blowing things out of proportion. It can be immensely frustrating, because if you get that travel advisory, it can affect a destination for years.
Yeah, no, it's serious, and it affects the lives of the people who live there, who might have been dependent on tourism income. But given some of the awful things that have happened to tourists, you can understand why the warnings are there.
Yeah, it is understandable, despite the frustrations of those of us on the ground.
I have to say, the terrible things that have happened to a very tiny number of tourists compared to the hundreds of thousands who have had a wonderful holiday in the region.
Yeah, I mean, and look what happens in London, in the States, in every country that you can name. But Africa feels like we unfairly written off.
I agree, and this idea that when something bad happens in one African country, you don't go to the continent is just absolutely ludicrous.
Going back to gorillas, I was reading this article in Travel Africa magazine. People are always interested in gorillas, and there's a nice feature and it says, is there a better example of how tourism can drive conservation and sustain communities? Dian Fossey would have been immensely, she would have been overjoyed, wouldn't she, at the
I think she'd be proud of. She was always very disparaging of many tourists who she had a term to describe them as idle rubberneckers. But that was partly because they were coming into her home, the Karasoke Research Centre, and rubbernecking into her window. And she sometimes said she would hide under her desk because she didn't want, she was trying to get on with her work, and tourists would want hours of her time. And there was one lady who was in her 80s who made it up to camp, and Diane sat her down and made a tea and was really impressed that she'd done that. So she could be hospitable, but it all got a bit too much, because as she became more and more of a world figure, then people would make that pilgrimage, and she would not be as welcoming as...
That's understandable. Yeah,
Of course, it was her home, and she wasn't there to be on show as a tourist attraction. In one sense, the fact that people climb up to her grave, for some it is like they want to go and pay their respects to someone they admire greatly, and that's very touching, because it's a beautiful location to be buried. But the thought that people now have to buy a ticket to go and see Diane's grave is slightly distasteful. Again, though, I'm sure Diane would think, well, okay, I think it's helping to fund the conservation of the park. So I think she'd go with that. Just as when she came to the UK in 1984, when the British edition of her book, Gorillas in the Mist, was published, she came and did some interviews and one lecture in the Linnaean Society in London. And it was well attended, it was packed, and she held the room as she could, speaking very softly, at times making the audience laugh in delight. And during her lecture, she recognised that tourism was helping to bring resources into the park, and the gorillas were safer, even though she had feared, because before Bill Webber and Amy Vedder used her methods to habituate gorillas for tourism, the tourists who tried to get to see gorillas were doing so without permission, and the only habituated groups were the research groups, so they were interfering with the research and disturbing the gorillas, and it was generally a bad thing. But thankfully, Bill and Amy set up the gorilla rules, and although they've been amended slightly, went from 6 people to 8 people per day, The 1 hour is stuck, and the 1 visit a day is stuck. And
Yes.
so if some civil servant in the capital city of any of the 3 countries decided, oh no, they can manage 2 visits a day, it would happen. But it hasn't. This respect for the gorillas and their well-being is central to the success of gorilla tourism. Just as I think where there are some whale watching activities where people go and see whales, and if they're respectful and keep their distance and the whales aren't stressed or disturbed, the whales will come over to you to investigate these boats with these peculiar little creatures on them. And that's a very positive thing. And the boat owners and the people in the hotels and the restaurants in the nearby town where the tourists come and stay are all benefiting from the whales. I don't know that there's anything quite as successful in terms of the economics as gorilla tourism. About 20-something years ago, I did a project for Born Free in Churchill in Manitoba, where polar bears are the big attraction for part of the year. And they have 3 tourist seasons in Churchill, bears, birds and belugas.
Amazing.
And so bird watchers come at one time of the year, beluga whale watchers come at another time of the year, and the polar bear watchers come when the bears are there. And there, the only people who benefit from the bear tourism are the private sector. That there is no park entrance fee, and it kind of works because everyone values bears because the tourists come, and if you've got a vehicle and you can take people out, you've got a living. But there is no direct, and then those businesses pay their taxes and the government uses some of that tax money to protect areas, but a lot of the bear activity is not in a protected area, it's in the town sometimes. So it's very different. And with orangutans, Indonesia has never capitalized on the interest that visitors have in seeing the shaggy red apes. So when I first took tourists there with the Orangutan Foundation, I think it was something like the park ticket was 17.5p, most of which went to the capital, not to run the park. So, and it's gone up a bit since then, but it's still nothing like the price that people pay to see gorillas. It's unfortunate that tourist attraction animals are treated so differently. You'd think you'd want to pay the same to see a chimpanzee or a gorilla, but as you know, the tickets are different. More for gorillas.
Yes.
And if only the DRC would become secure, both for the people and the wildlife, bonobos would be a massive attraction. So many people who have seen gorillas and chimps and want to see the other African ape can't do so because the travel insurance won't cover them to go into the DRC. So that's frustrating, but it will come, I'm sure, eventually.
I'd love to see bonobos. How would you describe a bonobo in comparison to a gorilla or a chimpanzee?
Well, there's sometimes the 2 sort of chimp species, the same genus, Pantroglodytes used to be called a common chimp, but of course its numbers are declining. It's sometimes called a robust chimp to compare it with the bonobo, which is called the gracile chimp. Right. So they're more slender. They're not particularly smaller, but they are lighter, and so there's maybe similar height, but a more slender build. Very different society. And bonobos are south of the curve of the Congo River, and chimpanzees are from West Africa to Uganda and Tanzania, north of the curve of the Congo River. So a much wider distribution of chimpanzees. 21 countries have chimpanzees in Africa, only 1 has bonobos.
Right, okay.
And it's the DRC, which makes it difficult to visit them. I had the good fortune to take a film crew in to film bonobos, and it was an amazing experience. They are so graceful and adept at moving around in the canopy. And you've heard of tennis elbow. Well, there's a phenomenon called primatologist neck. You kind of get a crick in your neck for constantly looking up in the canopy. So I would lie on the ground and use my binoculars and watch. And I was watching them feeding overhead, and they were feeding on the leaves of these massive trees. And as they moved, one of the leaves fluttered down and landed on my chest.
Wow.
Oh, so thank you very much.
Connected.
And I tasted it. It was delicious. A sort of slightly lemony, aromatic taste. And I thought, whoa, if you could harvest those leaves and put them in packets, you could sell them in a supermarket for a huge price. But as it is, I don't even know the species. It was just a tree that bonobos like to eat the leaves off, and one of them gifted me by chance. Landed on my chest. I couldn't believe that. And it was very, very tasty. So sometimes I always try ape food plants to see what they're like.
Okay.
Because we're apes, and some of them are quite bitter. Some of them are okay, but some of them you think, whoa, that's great. And that was one of those. I can't even tell you what species it was because I was only visiting, and I didn't have a botanist with me. And I ate the specimen.
For celebrating a gorilla birth at London Zoo, how do you feel about that as a gorilla lover and on behalf of Born Free? I mean, that gorilla being captivity, it's not a mountain gorilla.
No, a
It's
birth
still a gorilla.
is in almost every respect a celebratory event. It's wonderful for the mother, it's a new life, and by chance I was speaking at the Primate Society of Great Britain Spring Scientific Meeting, which was being hosted by ZSL, the Zoological Society of London, and the night before the conference started, this mother gave birth. So of course a whole hall full of primatologists wanted to go and see the baby, and I took photographs of this baby. But you have to ask, well, what is the future for that baby?
Yeah.
She might live, he or she, I'm not sure what the sex the baby was,
can't remember.
but he or she might live for 40 or 50 years. And if it's 40 or 50 years in a yard the size of many people's back garden, with a little bit of environmental enrichment, but every major decision in life taken by the humans that control that gorilla, who you can mate with, how long you spend with that family, whether or not you get on well there. If the computer says, oh, we've got too much genetic representation of this line here, we have to move this gorilla somewhere else, you take them from your friends and family and put somewhere else, you just get settled down again, and it might happen again. So it's managing computers like shuffling a deck of cards, and I don't think that respects the bonds between the individuals, the friendships, the family relationships, which in the wild are what makes gorilla society work. You know, gorillas are autonomous beings. They grow up, learn the culture of their group, and learn how to utilize their habitat, and all that is taken away from them in captivity. So it's lovely seeing a baby gorilla, but tinged with sadness for what future there is, unless more zoos follow the example of the Aspinall Foundation. The late John Aspinall dreamed of putting gorillas back in the wild, and his son Damien is making that a reality. And they've reintroduced, in some cases, or introduced in other cases, gorillas from Kent, from Howletts and from Port Lim, into two projects, one in Gabon and one in Congo Brazzaville. And those gorillas are now having babies in the wild.
Amazing.
There have been some deaths because these are gorillas that do not have an immune system that's used to African diseases and African foods, but there have been more successes than failures, and the potential of restoring them to their natural habitat is good for them because they get their autonomy back. They become self-governing individuals, and the habitat, which has been depleted of gorillas or have gorillas' absence for decades, is suddenly more complete. You're putting the gardeners back into the forest, which improves the forest and makes life, in my view, much better for the gardeners. So that's my concern that I know Born Free shares. I've been working with the Born Free Foundation since Dian was killed, actually.
Okay.
The year that Dian was killed, a few weeks after her death, I was living in Bristol. The phone rang. This is a phone on a wire in the hall. So I went out to the hall and picked it up, and it was Virginia McKenna.
Wow.
You know, an actress who I grew up watching, Born Free and Ring of Bright Water, and all those films that she and her late husband Bill. But then he wasn't late. He was
around
you know, asking if, because Dian had been an advisor to the then charity called Zoocheck on gorilla matters, and they said, would I mind taking on that role? And I was flattered to be asked, and I said yes, of course. And since 1986, I've had this very positive relationship with the Born Free Foundation, and I act as a part-time consultant for them, which is why I was representing them in Uzbekistan, talking about migratory species.
Let's talk about African names. So your name is Mandevu, is that right?
I have got a beard, a Mandevu.
Is that what it means?
Mandevu is bearded one, yes.
Okay.
But in Bukavu and Kahuzi-Biega National Park, I'm known as Shabada.
Shabada, okay.
Father of two, because my wife and I had twins.
Yes.
So if you have twins, it's quite a special thing in some cultures.
You're Salongo in Uganda. That's what you would be called.
Ah.
Salongo.
Maybe the people in Uganda don't realise that I'm a Salongo.
Ah, hey, yeah, it's a real.
I'm
status.
Shabada, and my wife is Nyabada.
Oh, fantastic.
Mother of two.
Yes. Which great ape is your favourite, by the way?
My wife.
Okay. Non-human. Which non-human?
No, I'm sorry. I'm a Shabadeur, a father of twins. We don't have favourites.
No, okay.
I'm an equal opportunities conservationist, and all species are amazing in their own way.
Yes.
I have, of course, the deepest roots and the longest experience with mountain gorillas.
Yes.
But the times that I visited western lowland gorillas, and there are now some habituated families that you can go and visit in a similar way, those are extraordinary, and they're much more arboreal. So the go up lianas and the muscles, they look more muscular. Actually, in the way that Bwindi gorillas look more muscular than Virunga gorillas, because there are more fruit trees, so they spend more time clambering about, working out, and so they've got much better definition. Mountain gorillas in the Virungas tend to sit around and eat celery. There's not so much exercise involved. They're still pretty strong, but I think you don't quite get the definition. And in Kahuzi Biega, the eastern lowland gorillas, or growlers gorillas, which is the largest subspecies in terms of the record male size that's been shot by a hunter and measured, those are even more muscular, again, because there's so many fruit trees and they're spending their time up in the canopy, working out, eating, being in the gardens of the forest.
They're more musticular, as Ugandans might say.
Ah, wow.
That's English for you. Ugandan English.
Determined to make a positive difference, whether you're in your backyard or local park. I'm fond of saying that if you can't save the world and have a good time while you're doing it, what's the point? So yes,
very good advice.
Be positive and cheerful, and
okay, thank you so much for your time.
It's a pleasure. Nice to see you.
Yes,
and I hope next time I see you will be at
Sunbird Hill.
Sunbird Hill.
You've been listening to the East Africa Travel Podcast, hosted by me, Charlotte Beauvoisin, author of Diary of a Mzungu, a blog that I've been writing since 2008. The 20th edition of Kwitizina, the gorilla naming ceremony, takes place in Rwanda this year, and the 2024 event will be on the 18th of October. I've just had confirmation from Rwanda Development Board. If you've enjoyed my conversations with Ian, please check out the show notes. There's a long list of further reading and links to some of the organisations that he works with and represents. During lockdown, Ian posted regular updates, and the hashtag Brighten Your Day showcased all kinds of interesting creatures, big and small, many of them from Ian's garden in Gloucestershire. You can follow him on LinkedIn, Facebook and X, formerly known as Twitter. His Twitter handle is 4apes, number 4apes. And links are in the show notes. If you're looking to replace your mobile phone and you're at all disturbed by anything that was mentioned about the DRC in our conversation, then you might want to look up Fairphone. Ian was very keen to tell me about the Fairphone that he has. The instability in the DR Congo doesn't get much press attention, but millions of people have been displaced or killed or are living in awful conditions because of the ongoing wars and battles for resources, particularly coltan, which goes in mobile phones. And if you're at all interested in environmental issues and the future of the Congo and its people and the gorillas, you might want to look up Fairphone. I recently heard a shocking statistic that there are 120 million unused phones in our homes and drawers and so on. I'm guilty of having an unused phone because I'm always thinking, what happens if mine breaks or mine gets stolen? It's good to have a backup. But I hadn't thought about the fact that they're the unused resources sitting there, lying there. If we were all to recycle these phones, and certainly please don't ever throw a phone in the bin, then perhaps we could help in a very small way reduce the pressure on the Congo and its people, and perhaps contribute to reducing to some of the suffering there. You might think I'm going off at a tangent, but it's all related. Another of Ian's projects that we didn't talk about is EcoFlix. It's a similar model to Netflix, but has beautiful nature, environmental and all kinds of interesting coverage from around the world. It's carefully selected as well, so that if children watch it, they're not going to be too disturbed by anything they see. And schools and other institutions can get free access. Otherwise, for you and me, paying adults, there's a subscription fee. Ian is Head of Conservation at EcoFlix. Huge thanks to Ian Redmond for being one of the first guests on the East Africa Travel Podcast. It's been an absolute honour to speak to him, and I've learnt so much, as with every interaction with him. If you've enjoyed this episode, please share it with your friends, or give us a review on Apple or Spotify, or write a comment on Diary of a Mzungu. See you next week.